here's the plan. I'm going to try to just walk through the glossary with you so that you can, to help you in preparation for your studies. So this is going to be the quick and dirty basics. Don't look at these as exact quotes, but rather make sure you understand the concepts behind them. It should fit into the overall scheme that I provided through lecture and class. So here we go. Commercial operations. This would be the first chapter. O&Os. O&Os are owned and operated. I'm sorry, I just finished lunch and my throat's a bit dry. O&Os are owned and operated by the networks. These are stations that the networks themselves own the licenses for. This is as opposed to affiliates. Affiliates are stations where the networks have a contract in order for the stations to carry the program or give clearance to the program. But O&Os are directly owned by the networks. Network compensation. In the case of a network having an affiliate, sometimes these affiliates are in highly desirable markets such as New York, Chicago, places like that. So sometimes the networks will compensate the stations for carrying their programming, for using up that station's valuable airtime. Basically, they're paying them to use to carry their programming, and this makes sense for networks again if they want to be in some of these larger larger markets, so they can hit the mass audience. Clearance, a term I mentioned before. Clearance is when a local station allows the network's programming to go over the broadcast of that station. It's when the station says, okay, we'll carry that game, that show, whatever it might be. Independents, these are stations that don't have a network affiliation. Simple enough. They get their programming usually through syndication or through local production. Head end, this is a cable term. This is the main headquarters for the local cable company. It's where they have all their offices, their engineering, their downlinks, etc. That's all at the head end, and all the programming then is distributed from that point. Per subscriber fee, self-explanatory. It's the fee per subscriber to whether it's a cable service, satellite service, anybody who pays fees to use that means of programming. Avails. These are this is the amount of segments you have for advertising. The avails, where the breaks are in a particular show. Inventory, how many spots there are. You may have a break, that would be the avail, with 3 or 4 spots inside for inventory. Cooperative advertising. Now, cooperative advertising is when a national advertiser and a local advertiser team up. Remember, I gave you the story about Wolverine boots. They're the national advertiser who sells boots. They teamed up with a local boot and shoe store, and each of them paid half of the advertising cost. And when you have a co-op advertising situation, the stations usually have to provide a POP, or a proof of performance. This is a notarized document officially stating that these ads did indeed run on this station. Another example of cooperative advertising will be some of these beautiful shots of a Ford or a Chevrolet or something driving along the Malibu coast, being advertised in a local on a local TV channel, advertising the local auto dealer. The national advertiser, Ford or Chevrolet, whoever, provides the advertising, the commercial content, and then they'll put a tag, to buy your Ford, whatever, go to the Motor Mile, and you go to ABC Ford, whatever it might be. Okay, national sales. Network sales are when advertising is sold by the network, and then it's carried as part of network programming. National sales are when, say, a local advertiser works through a national rep to find advertisers who are trying to hit that specific market rather than trying to have across the board through the networks. For example, as I said, if I sold, let's say I sold snowmobiles, okay, it doesn't do very much good for me to advertise in Florida. But let's say I want to hit the major stations, Chicago, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, New York, places, above the snow line where they could use that product. Well, instead of having to go to each individual station in each individual market, I'll just go to a national sales rep, and then they will facilitate by buying time out or setting up contracts with the stations in that local market. I don't have to know all the stations. The national rep firm does. Local sales, well, that's just that, local sales sold by the local station to local advertisers. Proof of performance, I've just mentioned that. It is a notarized official document, a copy of the log, a statement that says that these ads aired at this particular time. It's a legal document. To fake one is fraud. It is a statement that I indeed performed as the contract called for. Ratings. Okay, ratings are the percentage of the total market. In TV households, let's say if you have a 100,000 in the market, 100,000 TV households, you have a 10 rating. That means 10% of the total market, or 10,000 homes, are watching your show. Now, this is opposed to a share. A share is the percentage of the people using the media at that time. In television, we call this the HUT level, houses using television. So let's say you have a 10 share. Somebody has a 10 rating, somebody else has a 15 rating. That would be 25. And let's say you only have 2 stations in that market and 100,000 people. That would really be a low number of stations in that market. But we're making hypotheticals here. So that 10% of the market, let me see, I'm not doing that right. Let me see. Let's make that a 10 rating and a 20 rating. Okay, that gives us 30%. So the share would be for 10 would be 33%. Now, where am I getting that from? Okay, if you add the ratings up, you get a HUT level of 30. Okay, 10% rating and a 20% rating. That gives you 30. The 10% is 1/3 of the total number of people watching television at that time. That means 70% of the market is not watching television. But of that 30% that is, that 10% rating is a 33% share. 1/3. Remember, you've got 10%, 10 rating, 20%, a 20 rating. So that's 30 total. And then the share, the amount, that 10 would go, what you do is you take your HUT level, which would be the 30, and then you divide, this sounds weird, you divide your rating by the HUT level. So the 10 rating divided by the 30 gives you 0.33333333. Well, that is a 33 share, 1/3. Okay, hopefully you got that. Yes, there will be ratings and shares questions on the test. CPM, cost per thousand. Let's go back to that illustration. So I have a 10 rating out of a market that has 100,000 TV households. That means 10,000 TV households are watching my show. Well, if I charge, let's say, $500 for the for an ad, now it would be pretty high. $250, that's still pretty high, but let's go with $250. Okay, so let me go ahead and do this. I have got a 10,000 TV households. 10,000 TV households are watching it. Get rid of the 1,000 because I'm talking about cost per thousand, and then I have the $250. You see right here, 10 goes into the $250, 25 times. So it's $25 per thousand, which is really not that good of a deal. But, that's how you'd figure how many thousands it takes to reach, how many dollars it takes to reach each lot of thousand. Another way to do this, it's simple. This is a little bit of math here. You got a zero here, you got a zero here, so it's 25. But that's just a shortcut. Anyway, Tradeout or barter. This is when an organization may trade a product, or in the case of programming, sometimes they will provide a program and give the local station spots that they can sell in the program. Okay, the larger barter or trade. One example would be when we used to have a furniture store come in and provide the decorating for our morning show. We would give them free advertising, and they would provide us with new furniture. Simple trade out. And no money changed hands. It was just they got advertising, and we got a nice looking set. I used to do that with food. We used to work with Chick-fil-A, and Chick-fil-A would provide food for the crew, and we would give them advertising in the Friday night football games. That would be an example of trade out for product. Now, another way people do trade out is, let's say, we did this with a hunting show. The people who produced the show, they sold half of the ad spots, and they got the revenue from that to cover their production cost. We also had half of the ad spots as well. So we could sell that advertising, place it in their show, and we would get the money for that. So they provided us with programming that was theoretically supposed to draw an audience, and we were able to make the revenue off that audience. So again, no money necessarily changed hands. We traded them airtime for them to air their product and make money off of it in exchange for the revenue that we can make by selling advertising in that product, in that show. Viral marketing. This is when basically, oh wow, this is neat, I'm going to forward it on to so-and-so. Again, standard internet marketing, if you see it's produced by Doritos, you're saying, okay, it's just another ad. But if your best friend says, hey, this is really funny, and sends you an email or puts it on their Facebook page, whatever, in social media, oh, wow, so-and-so liked this, maybe I'll like it, and then you watch it. And when it starts getting passed on and on and on and on and on, it goes viral. And it's a very interesting phenomenon to see how marketing occurs that way. What does trigger people's interest and desire to forward something on? Let me see, payola. Okay, payola is when someone receives a benefit, usually cash, for getting plugs or airplay for something, but does not disclose it to the TV station, and basically takes money for doing that. This came out of when records started being played on radio. Local record promoters would come to DJs and say, hey, we'll slip you an extra 25, extra 50, $100 if you would run this song, push this song maybe once an hour, because they found a connection between exposures on the radio and record sales. So basically they were bribing the DJs, and this was wrong. No surprise. So laws were passed against payola. Payola is when they would pay these DJs to push something. Plugola, although it's not on the list, is a variation on this. This is when somebody just pushes something, continues to give free advertising, if you will, to a product or a place or a service that they have an interest in without disclosing it to the station. And I had to deal with this. I had a guy who kept on plugging his church, which is, I don't have a problem with encouraging churches, but everything became an excuse. Oh, that's right down the street from so-and-so church. This is right across the street from so-and-so church. And finally, my board of trustees were like, oh, are they paying us for advertising? Well, they weren't. But this man was using his position as a way to plug his church, since it was a new church, and taking advantage of his situation as an announcer at the TV station. That was plugola, and that is wrong. You don't just take advantage of it just as a way to plug. Okay, the next up is clipping. This is when you have a network show, and then the local broadcaster clips out advertising from the network that they're not and puts in their own spot when they don't have permission to do so. The networks will say, okay, we get breaks 1, 3, 5, and you have breaks 2 and 4. And that's okay. You air your ads in 2 and 4 as a local broadcaster, and the network has breaks 1, 3, and 5. But if I were to go into break 3 and cut out one of their commercials or cut away from the programming 10 seconds, 15 seconds, depending on the little insert that I want to put in, and that's clipping. You can't alter the network programming in a way that's not consistent with the contract. Multicasting. This is when they provide multiple services and avenues through, like say a digital channel. The bandwidth now with digital, the old bandwidth that we had with analog was 6 megahertz. Well, now it's, you don't need that much, so you can send multiple channels down the same pipe or bandwidth. So that was our multiple programming feeds. You can have, 4.1, 4.1, 4.2, whatever. Underwriting. Okay, this is when you have a non-commercial station, and there are companies that will support specific programming, but not advertising. It's this Sesame Street is brought to you by the Pew Charitable Trust or something like that. Or when we have organizations that sponsor things like our football games on WNGR. Narrowcasting. Excuse me. This is when, instead of trying to get the broad audience, you're looking for a specific segment of that audience. You're not going to be able to go up against, let's say, Monday Night Football. So you run but you know that there's some people who really don't like football, and you try maybe a science fiction to target maybe younger people or something like that. Or you might try, and you're targeting a specific audience that you believe you can sell advertising specifically to. That's narrowcasting, as opposed to the broad audience programming. TV households. Well, we've already talked about that. That's how many households are available in the market to view. Whether or not they're all watching, that's another story. The ones that are watching make up, again, the HUT level, houses using television. And the same thing is true for radio. They have the size of the market, that's all the potential listeners, and then you also have those who are using radio at any given time. LOP. That doesn't mean lop off your head. That means least objectionable programming. Basically, this is kind of going out of fashion now as a theory. But basically the idea is that people, because of inertia, just don't want to get up off the couch. Now we have a remote control. But they don't want to get off the couch. So as long as they can tolerate the show, they'll stay with it. More and more, this is not the case. Fewer and fewer people are watching broadcast television. More and more people are choosing specifically what they want to watch. So, but it is part of the programming theory history that you need to be aware of. And HUT level, we've already talked about. Now, just a couple of things about non-commercial operations. The reserved channel principle. This is basically that certain channels and frequencies are reserved in radio and in television, specifically for non-commercial / educational programming. That's why when people go, why can't you get another frequency for WNGR if you're boxed in? Well, it's because there are no more non-commercial frequencies available. Certain ones are designated commercial. Certain ones are designated for non-commercial. Carnegie Foundation, that's one of the large financing organizations for educational radio and television. Public Broadcasting Act of 1967 actually set up the mechanism for the network, if you will, for educational television. And the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is the funding agency that makes sure that, WGBH in Boston, let's say, produces a program. They distribute the money to them to support their production. And that money comes from a variety of sources, that we talked about. Some from the government grants, some from state, local production, primarily, and some from station fees, primarily from station fees, where they will take money from the public television affiliates and then distribute and then use that money to support those who are doing production. So the production isn't free to the stations. The stations, as affiliates, pay funds back into based on their market size and things like that. National Public Radio is the radio network, one of the radio networks that works with educational radio. Primarily, they provide news and some programming. CPB qualified. Okay, Corporation for Public Broadcasting. There are specific requirements in terms of revenue, hours, engineering, staff size of full-time people, elements like this. That are required for a station to be a member of the corporation, to be supported and work with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and they just have to meet these standards. We don't really care to be part of CPB. Our mission is different. Ours is ministerial. Therefore, we're not really too worried about whether or not WNGR is CPB qualified. Underwriting, we've already talked about. BBC TV is just an example of one of the sources for programming that is often brought into public television. One of the many. And this would be from a foreign network. Now, Children's Television Workshop is an idea of a local production company or organization that produces their own programming for distribution through the educational network, through PBS. Now, some of their products, well, Sesame Street. Children's Television Workshop was produced by Sesame Street. Sesame Street was produced by the Children's Television Workshop, and it's interesting now that someone else is trying to take it over and run it as a commercial venture. Then you had shows like Zoom and others that were actually produced not by a production house, but produced by local stations that were within the network. In this case, Zoom was WGBH, etc. Now, programming. We're getting through this. Okay. Segmentation, basically segmenting the audience and learning how to develop programming to meet specific segments within the audience, particular niches. The 80-20 principle, 80% of the funding, 80-20 is a general principle. 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. You've heard that. And here it is 80% of the revenue is controlled by 20% of the those participating in the industry. Channel repertoire. This is where the basically each person has their own repertoire of what they're going to use. You may have 200 channels, but you only watch about 5 on a regular basis. You know, the internet is infinite, almost, in terms of how many websites are out there. But you really only have 3, 4, or 5 that you regularly go to. That's your repertoire for media consumption. Zero-sum market, the idea that markets are fixed in size, so that if you want to gain market share, you have to take them from someone else. So let's say as a broadcaster, there's only going to be a set number of people who are going to be watching TV, let's say on a Friday night. So if you're going to build an audience, you have to pull from other TV shows. Now, this generally holds true, although there are some shows, like I mentioned, Dallas, on one of the poorest nights of TV viewing, it commanded a rating that was only beat by 60 Minutes on the strongest night of television viewing. Well, in that case, Dallas kind of defied this idea of zero-sum market. They expanded their market. But even in that, they didn't necessarily enlarge the market. They just took people away from doing other things, going out that night, going to a movie, going to a ball game. And those people, instead of going to that form of entertainment, chose to stay home and watch television. So I guess, in a sense, it does fulfill zero-sum market. It's just not just the television market. It brought people into the television market. Day parts. Well, basically, that's every programming schedule is divided into parts of the day. In radio, you have morning drive, morning, noon, early afternoon, afternoon drive, early evening, etc. During the television day, you have overnight, you have early morning, fringe, you have, you know, it's divided up until you get to prime time. And different times of the day command different sizes of audiences and different types of audiences. And so, depending on the nature and the size of the audience that would be participating, that sets the value for that day part. So, if you have a strong personality, you put them in the morning drive because that's when you have the largest potential audience, or you put them in the evening drive. Pardon me. Off-network syndication. Now, off-network syndication is a show that has been on the network, developed an audience, and then it's sold into syndication. Remember, syndication is where programming can be purchased that's not currently on the network. Movies, game shows, things like that. They sometimes go directly to syndication. That would be first-run syndication. But off-network syndication, let me go back to that. This is when a show has been viewed and developed an audience on the network, and then let's say they get 3 seasons under their belt. They're in the can, as it were, and they've already been shown on the network. Well, they may sell those seasons to a syndicator to make more money, which makes sense. And then this is especially where the production houses make their money. The networks make their money by the advertising, but the rights are retained by the production company, unless it's a network-produced show. And then after they fulfill the obligation, the contract to the networks, then it goes into syndication, and it's in off-network syndication. Audience flow. This is where the audience stays from one show to go to the next show, bridging over the commercial break at the top of the hour or something like that. You want audience to flow in and to stay. You don't want audience to flow out, and there are various tricks for that. Stripping is when they take a show that has enough episodes in the can, and they will run it 5 days of the week. When you come home and you're ready to sit down and relax after a day at school, and you can, when I was a kid, it was Batman or it was Johnny Quest every day at 3 o'clock of 3:30 because Barnabas Collins and Dark Shadows came on at 3. And then we had the Rat Patrol on at 4 o'clock. So Monday through Friday you're going to watch these shows at this given time in the late afternoon before the news. Now, they also do something called checkerboarding, and that's where you might run, let's say, Batman on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Superman on Tuesday and Thursday, something like that, where you change the blocks around. Lead-in, that's when you have a strong show, commands an audience, and then you followed it up with another show. You promote the second show in the first show to kind of get the attention of the audience that's watching the more popular show, and that provides a strong lead into the second show. That would be a strong lead in. Counter programming is whenever you're try to provide an alternative to the program type. So let's say let's say the other networks are putting dramas on Monday nights in their prime time all the way up. So you might put in comedies. Or let's say when the news is on at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, since we're in Eastern time. The local independent station may try putting in, that's what they do, they put in MASH or another popular show as an alternative. See, it's not going competition. Let's say in our market, when 4, 7, and 13, and 21 for that matter, go head-to-head with their news at, let's say, 6 o'clock. Well, if I'm another station, I'm not going to go for news. I'm not going to get them at 6 o'clock because they've already got established audiences. So I may run a sitcom or something that would be of interest for those people who really don't want to hear about the news. And so that's a way that you counter. Competitive programming is say, I can do what you can do and I can do it better. And that's when you go head-to-head with a similar type programming. Now, block programming. going back to that Monday night, if I have the same kind of show, let's say if I have a drama, a kind of a serial drama, and then a police drama, and something like that, and they all back up one after the other, or like Tuesday night on CBS with NCIS and NCIS NO, and another show whose name I can't remember, but it's still kind of science fiction-y, but it still has the government and solving cases and all that. So when you have those shows together, you think that the audience that would tune in to at the beginning of your prime time will stay with you to the second show and into the third show. That would be a block. You get the audience in the beginning, and because you have the same kind of shows, you appeal to their interest in that show and carry it all the way through. Stunting is when after your network, your competitors have their schedule, you decide you're going to change things around, and they've done all this work building up their schedule based on what they know you're going to have, and then you change it. That's stunting, and people will do that during like rating sweeps when they take the numbers. That they may, you may have a set pattern of how the schedule's going to run, and then all of a sudden in the sweeps you release this blockbuster film, Star Wars, in anticipation of the broadcast coming up or something like that. Tentpole is when you have a strong show in the middle, and the idea being that it will pick up, you put a weak show in front of it, but people tune into here will say, oh, I might want to watch this show. And then you got a strong audience here in the middle. Let me go this way. And then people who've watched it will, you promo enough and it gets lead into the show that follows. And then you have just the opposite. You have two shows that are strong, and then they support in a hammock the show that's in the middle. I feel like I'm doing Wallace and Gromit here. Anyway, Wallace and Gromit. That was called a comedic relief right there at that point. Let me see. Appointment television. This is the idea that we're moving further and further away where people are watching as the networks decide they want to watch. Instead, local television more and more is going to become appointment. If it's a newscast, if it's a football game or other sports or something like that, when the time of viewing is important. We want to stay current with the news. We want to watch the game with everybody else, whatever it might be. That's appointment television. But general programming is less and less setting the schedule for people's lives. Why? Because they can go to Netflix, they can go to online services like from CBS Online or something like that, and watch the show at their convenience. But there are still some things that are time-sensitive, time-based. An inaugural, like I said, a major news event, or, again, a sporting event, the Super Bowl. After it's played, who's going to watch it? We know who won. So people want to be there as it's occurring, even if that being there is via broadcast. Flow through, that's what you want. We were talking about audience flow. This is when, they're watching this show with you, and they stay over to watch this show. Now, there are ways to facilitate that, and one of them is called hot switching. That's where, this show is coming to an end, and I overlap it with the show, where I'm running the credits here, and I'm running the credits from this show, but I'm also giving kind of the previews to this show at the same time. You see that they'll have the two frames. Sometimes they will go, and as this show ends, they go directly into the next show. Then they'll have the introduction to the show and the commercial break. So this is a way to build seamless flow through from one show to another. Now, format or hot clock. This is a hot clock right here. You see it shows, this is the one from WNGR. It shows, a break at the top of the hour, and then we had breaks throughout. Boy, this is weird, going backwards. And then in here we have program music blocks right here. That's what these big parts are. And it's a very simple hot clock, and it shows how we want to schedule our hour. Now, depending on the day part, you may have different hot clocks. If you're in morning drive, well, you want to hit that weather, and you want to hit the traffic, and you want to hit things like that. If you're an afternoon drive, well, the weather is not as critical because people aren't getting dressed for the day. They've already had the day. So you may adjust what goes into the hot clock depending on the time of day. Deficit financing. Okay, you remember how I talked about how networks make their money through the advertising, but production companies really don't make as much money in those first few seasons? What they're hoping is that they'll make the money in syndication where they have the rights. These are the production companies. So they'll engage in some deficit financing for that first couple of seasons until they can get enough episodes in the can and a big enough audience so they know that it can command big bucks when it goes into syndication. All news format. This was kind of a phenomenon that was introduced by CNN about 82, if I remember correctly. And that's when, we had 24/7 news. Well, up until then, that was unheard of, but finally CNN said, let's try this. And they became the news source. If you wanted to watch news, you knew you could tune in. And they were the pioneers in that particular news format. Reality programming, we've talked about this is pseudo-reality, but you're using unpaid actors, you're using reusable sets and setting up reality, and it affects the bottom line. You don't have as much outgo, therefore the percentage of what you take in makes for a higher profit. Let me see, local programming. That's stuff produced by the local TV station or radio station. Syndicated programming, that is programming that is bought from a syndicator. They may have movie packages, old off-network stuff, game shows, things like that. But you're not getting it from the network. You're getting it from a programming provider. This could be for radio or television. And then you've got network programming. This is programming provided by the network to its affiliates, and the affiliates can grant clearance to carry it. Remember that word. It's based on a contract relationship. NAPTI is one of the largest programming conferences. It's where people come and show off their new shows, and it's a big, big, big deal. Podcasting, distribution of the internet with programming content and the blogcast. Audience promotion, sales promotion, and brand management. Okay, when you're trying to audience promotion is when you're trying to promote your station or its programming to the audience. So, coming up tonight on the 5 o'clock news, we'll have this, this, and this, and this. Do that during the 4 o'clock hour. Or let's say if we're carrying a football game, make sure you stay tuned for My 40 News, something like that. After that, actually, it would have been WLOS, so Channel 13 News. But sales promotion. Now, this is promotion on the station that tells advertisers, you want to be part of us. And this is very beneficial for the sales department, and what's good for the sales department is good for revenue for the station. Brand management, just specifically that communication that is designed to manage how people perceive the brand. VNR, video news releases. This is when when an advertiser presents a new product or information about a product as news. So maybe a new drug has come out. Medical science has addressed this physical condition. Oh, and by the way, you need to buy our drug along the way, or a new product dressed up as scientific release. And pseudo events are another issue. Pseudo events are events, quote, that are staged specifically for news coverage. It's a way to get attention to your cause. Politicians do it all the time. They're going to go out and call a press conference when they really don't have new news to say. They just want to be in front of the cameras to keep their presence out in front of the people for, say, an upcoming election. When terrorists stage a terrorist attack, not really concerned about causing damage, but trying to get the news there to instill fear. That would be pseudo events.